Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to see how well I did at predicting what nonfiction books would end up being 5-star reads for me. A year ago during Nonfiction November, I made a video talking about 10 nonfiction books that I was pretty confident would earn 5 stars from me. I was definitely inspired, as a lot of other people were, by Mercedes over at Mercy's Bookish Musings, who did her original 5-star predictions video. Her video and most of the other videos I saw that were inspired by her video were mainly highlighting fiction. And I historically have been really bad at picking fiction for myself. I thought I would have a much better shot at success if I chose nonfiction instead. Now, a year later, I have read all 10 of those books. So let's have a little bit of a post-mortem. Let's see if I'm clairvoyant or if I'm in need of a week-long retreat to really get to know myself again. I'm going to go in the order I did in the original video, starting with Buzz by Thor Hansen. I correctly guessed that this would be the biggest slam dunk of a prediction on this list. I fell in love with Thor Hansen last year when I read his book on feathers and then his book on seeds. Both of those ranked on my top nonfiction books of the year list last year. He's like that one great teacher you have in school who manages to be buddy-buddy with you but still maintains his authority and entertains you while still getting some great info into your brain. He is amazing. Just a fantastic natural history writer. This book is all about bees, as the cover and title might suggest. It's all about how they evolved, their behavior, their role in food production. It's just wonderful. I think the only thing that could have made it better for me is if it were longer. After a middling introduction to Mary Roach, when I didn't really care for her book Gulp, I decided to go big with my second pick and choose the book that seems to be everyone's favorite out of her catalog, which is Stiff. This book is all about what happens to your body after you donate it to science, all the different ways in which it can be used. It, of course, discusses death and attitudes toward death, the science of decomposition, all that morbid stuff. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but there were a couple of things that kept it from being a full 5-star read for me. One of those is the fact that this book was published back in 2004, so it is a little bit dated. And then there's the fact that I had read Caitlin Doughty's first 2 books, Smoke It's in Your Eyes and From Here to Eternity, before I picked this book up. I've grown accustomed to Caitlin Doughty's style of bringing in conversations about death positivity to such morbid subject matter, and so it felt like this book was lacking a greater meaning. I understand that's not fair to this book since it came first and it can't really compete with things that come after it, but it is what it is. I do really love her dry sense of humor though. It's very similar to mine, which is one of several different reasons why I chose to use a sample of this for my voiceover narration demo. The session where I was in the booth reading from this book, recording it for my demo, both the director and the sound engineer were cracking up as I was reading it, like, what is this? I gave them both the title of this book and told them a little bit about it because I had already read it by that point. And by the next session, the next time I came in to record the next section of my demo, they had both bought a copy of it. So apparently I just sell books wherever I go. My next prediction was When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. This is the memoir of a brain surgeon who, after he is diagnosed with terminal cancer, switches roles and becomes a patient. In this book, he discusses his career within the medical field. He discusses how he first was diagnosed with cancer, how he went about fighting cancer, and ultimately how he knew when to stop fighting. It is a very sad book and it is definitely touching. But I've said this about the book before, I feel like you need to work in medicine in order to get the most out of this book. Like, I feel like if I were a doctor or a nurse, this would have resonated so much more deeply. And I've also said this next thing before, but I will reiterate that it feels positively awful to compare this book to Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, because how do you compare 2 deep books on human mortality and think about which one is better? But I do have to admit that I connected more to Atul Gawande's book because it talks about society's approach to aging and dying. I feel like it was broader in its appeal, and so I personally connected to it more. But this was still a great book, 4 out of 5 stars. Next is the biggest stumble on this list, The Personality Brokers by Merve Emre. This book is marketed as being the history behind the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI personality test, which has become one of the most widely used personality tests out there. Potential employers use it, the government uses it, it's become big business. They're really secretive about the origins of this test, almost like they're trying to hide a shady past. And this book at the beginning says that its aim is to uncover some of those secrets. But really, the history of its development is so boring. Let me summarize it for you. An old white woman is obsessed with the psychologist Carl Jung. She overparents her child and then uses her weird ideas about the world to sort people like laundry. The book is so focused on this mother-daughter duo, their history, and their really weird dynamic that you will forget that you're reading a book about the Myers-Briggs test until about halfway through. And that's because she doesn't talk about the Myers-Briggs test until about halfway through. It's one of the most uninteresting books I've read all year. I gave it 2 stars, and now I just really want to downgrade it to 1. The next one was much better. That was The Raven Master by Christopher Scaife. This book is the memoir of the current Raven Master at the Tower of London. He gives a little bit of his own personal history. He talks about how he got the job, and then he goes on to talk about the ravens. He does explain right away in this book that he's not an ornithologist, but he does know a lot about the ravens and obviously has a lot of stories from his own personal experiences with them. In addition to keeping the ravens, part of his job includes giving people tours around the historic Tower of London and telling them stories of the things that have happened there or reportedly happened there over the centuries. And part of this book is dedicated to talking about how much he loves history and how much he loves the art of storytelling. He is so charming. He is so dedicated to his job. The love just radiates off the page. 5 out of 5 stars. This next one was the other disappointment on this list. That book was The Secret Life of Cows by Rosamund Young. When I put this book on the list, I was under the impression that this would be a natural history book about cows, when in reality, this book is a collection of personal experiences with cows through working with them on an organic farm. Certainly, a lot of these stories do display all of the amazing qualities that cows have, namely their distinct personalities and their social nature. But I think you'll find that it's a lot of personal anecdotes starring many different cows. It got very jumbled because it was hard to tell them apart, and they had multiple names for each cow. It was hard to tell how the cows were related to one another. It was very confusing. So as much as it was endearing, it was also jumbled and hard to follow. 2.5 rounded up to 3 stars. This next prediction was much more successful. That book was Hammerhead, The Making of a Carpenter by Nina McLaughlin. This is a memoir all about a journalist who quits her desk job in order to become an apprentice to a carpenter. Despite having no background, she decides to learn as she goes. In the book, she talks about the jobs she takes. She talks about the lessons she learned. And what I really liked about it was that she names each chapter after a specific tool, and then goes on to talk about the life lessons that mimic the function of said tool. I knew it would be great, and it really, really was. It has everything I want out of a good memoir. It has the arc of the life story, it has really great writing, and it has the deep reflections into one's own personal character. I would have given it 6 stars if Goodreads gave me that option. Next was Foxes Unearthed by Lucy Jones. This was another kind of odd one in the style of The Secret Life of Cows, because I thought it was going to be a natural history of foxes, when it actually was a history of the sport of fox hunting and how British attitudes toward foxes have changed over time. It was interesting, just far more specific than I expected, and had I known that before I went into the book, I probably would have waited to pick it up until I had read a more general natural history on foxes. I know there is one that just came out called The Hidden World of the Fox by Adele Brand, so I'm interested to pick that one up and see how it compares. So this was good, it just didn't quite meet expectations. 3.5 stars rounded up to 4. The penultimate prediction on this list was Gulag by Anne Applebaum. This is an impressively researched history of the Soviet prison camp system and details just about every aspect of them and every horror to be found there. She brings in the right amount of skepticism when it comes to her archival research. She clearly has a deep understanding of the Russians, and she concludes the whole book talking about the current national attitudes toward this history, how the nation never really got a chance to come to terms with this history, let alone heal from it because of all the upheaval in the 90s. This book is a very intense read, but it is so well done. I will never forget this book. 5 out of 5 stars. This next book is the last on the list, but it is the first one I picked up. That book is Owl by William Service. This book is all about an orphaned owl chick who is taken in by the author and his family. As you would expect, the owl has a ton of personality and raises hell around the house. The whole thing is absolutely hilarious, both the owl's antics and the author's dry yet dramatic descriptions of him. I love loved this book, and it actually inspired me to develop a whole new obsession with the very specific subgenre of nonfiction where people take in orphaned wild animals out of necessity, not as pets. And if a book can light my fire for an entire subcategory of nonfiction, you best believe it's going to earn 5 stars. So if you were counting, that means 5 out of the 10 books I predicted would earn 5 stars actually did earn 5 stars. Of the remaining 5, 3 of them earned 4 stars, 1 of them earned 3 stars, and that last one earned 2 stars, maybe 1 star. So it's not an awful result, but I'm honestly really bummed out by the personality brokers and The Secret Life of Cows. It's just not what I expected from this project. I would expect the worst book on this list to earn 3 stars and then have the rest be 4 or 5 star reads. I know I'm being picky, but when you think about it, I didn't really enjoy 20% of the books on this list, and that's not the greatest. So basically I've decided that I want another try at this. I want another opportunity to try to pick 5-star nonfiction books for myself. I've actually already assembled the list, and that video will be coming very soon. If you've read any of these books, if you've heard of any of them, or if you're now interested in reading them after hearing me talk about them, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below, just so long as you don't want to talk about the personality brokers. But if you prefer to chat with me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles are in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.